Hi, welcome back. Here's our second look at our Blitz to PlayBASIC converter. So we're looking at this excellent GUI source. We're not doing many translations at the moment. We'll run the example and then have a quick talk about it. And so the conversion is taking at the moment about 300 milliseconds all up. We're doing 9,000 lines. That's 87,000 tokens. Now, if you look at the console, we're spitting out the converted code. So you'll see a lot of Blitz-isms still in there. And I want to talk about the way we'll tackle these in a second. So initially, I'm just concerned about things like very common functions, common replacements with words, for example. So this block here is kind of what I'm looking at. So we end up with something that pretty much should cut and paste and run in PlayBASIC. Except for that input statement, there's no comparative statement for that, so we'll have to add something for that. Up here, blank project, go across. I'll just rip that and put, sync wait key. So up here we can see we're grabbing some min strings from here. I'll show you the original code in a second. If we put them side by side, we can see the differences in them. So here's our converted code, and here's our original code. And you can see straight away the syntax highlighter from PB doesn't like it. The thing I added today actually was, you notice the function calls here mid and mid dollars. Now in Blitz, it's not the decoration or the postfix symbol for the return type are not baked into the command name. Well, as far as I understand it anyway. So in Blitz you can go mid $S2 or you can go mid dollars $S2, and they're the same function call. Now in PB they're actually not. If I ran this, it won't compile and run, but if I ran this the way this stands, this will return the ASCII value at character 2 rather than the string of that, if you know what I mean. Anyway, so paging through, you can see, because that's optional, any code that does that in the source code, in the source Blitz, wouldn't compile. So this here won't compile. So to make this work, we'd have to make the end function, repair that, hit compile again. If we're doing this manually, we have to repair the left dollars. So the right dollars there is the same. Now it's happy, hit compile again. Go to end if. Hit compile again. End selects another one. We don't support. Constant's short for constant. Do the constant replacements. That would be an end while. Try and run again. User declaration is going to appear within nests. So we've got something up here that's broken. Yeah, it's there. This is the original Blitz code, by the way. So in Blitz, it's okay to have else if with the white space between them. We don't support that. So PB is interpreting that as basically one if then or if else statement, with the second one here with no closing end if. So if we just close that out, should be fine. and that statement there is not supported. That's a Blitz command, so we don't really have any way of emulating that at the moment. Just put sync wake here at the end. If we run it, we get a different result. In PB, mid and mid dollars are two different functions. One's to return an ASCII value from a string, so you can grab a character directly from the string without having to return a string, which you would normally do in other basics. You would go, mid string, comma position, comma 1, grab the character from the string, and it comes back as a string. You'd call your ASCII function or the ASC function to convert that character to an integer. That's all fine, but returning a string is quite a slow, clumsy thing to do, so just pulling the character value out of the string is much more efficient. And this is the kind of things that would trip us up if we're doing this by hand. It would be easy to make this mistake, assume that because our program compiles, then it's working. What we actually want, if we test the converted code, which is this one here, get the E character from that test string. Because the converter's picked up the fact that a mid was used in the original Blitz code, and it knows that PB expects that to be mid dollars to have the same usage. Let's check out the actual program itself. I think since the initial version, which was just Alexa, I just based it off the HTML one on the forum recently. I think I had a bunch of keywords that were still in that version. So I've got a bit of that's done. I had to add support for more structural things in the language itself, because the other one was just concerned about highlighting certain keywords. It didn't care about other stuff, so I just let those fall through. For the moment, we're concerning ourselves with things like, the if, we support the else if, end if thing, the end function one's another one, type and end type are other ones there that have been repaired, end while is fixed, select case stuff has some initial conversion stuff made to it. So to do that, we're just stripping through. So the process is this: we import the code as text, we run the lexer over that, and it spits out an array, whereas all of the tokens are in one typed array, and each token links to the one following it. So we end up with a giant linked list from token to token to token all the way through the document. That's a different method that I've used in the past. I always tend to mess around with different approaches. I thought this might do well for this because we could do deletion and insertion and not really worry about having to rebuild the document all the time. So when we do replacements of these other things before, for example, let's run it again. If we look at the code here, so this end function here, now it's one word. Before it was two words, which means that before we actually had a pattern that was a keyword end, there was some white space, and the keyword function were beside each other. So what it does is that if it notices the end, it goes, okay, what's following this particular keyword? If it finds a white space next, it goes, okay, that's what I expected. Is the word following that? Is it function? Is it end function? Is it end type? Is it end select? And these other blocks of these other keyword combinations. If it's any one of those, we combine the text together and we do a deletion of the white space and the other token beside it. Because it's linked, we can just plop them at the end of the array. And so we're not necessarily moving through this typed array of tokens in a linear fashion. Initially it's going to be linear, but as we make changes to it, it'll be, the links will go forward and backwards or whatever. So, you know, to rearrange some of the expressions up here, what we have, it's not a good one there to look at, I think. You know, something that has a return type, for example, like the .gadget. Or, you know, that kind of thing from this GUI library. We'll be able to unlink and link them from here and then move them down to here. So we might not know the actual value coming out of the function, but at least we'll get things to move the return type to where it should be, and then you can make your modification yourself at the very end. To do a better job, you would actually have to write a compiler, because there are lots of little differences between Blitz and PlayBASIC that are going to catch you up. One of them is that Blitz is single instance. What I mean is that if I go back to a new document, for example, in PV, if I have $A equals hello, I can't then go, if I go, well, I can do this if explicit mode is not enabled. And if I run that, you might get something you expect or you don't expect. We get 0, and that's because when the Fraser walks through the code, it says $A, so it's the first usage of that particular keyword. So it assumes that it's going to be a variable, and it'll assume the type from the declaration, from the postfix. So it's going to be a string in this case. So it goes, okay, $A is a string, we'll add that to the variable table, it's in global scope. So the assignment makes sense to it. When we come down to the next line, it goes, oh, print's a command, cool. Let's resolve the expression. Let's resolve this expression, which is just happens to be one token or one keyword. It says the token A there again, but with no declaration, no postfix. It goes, oh, okay, there's a variable called A integer. Adds that to the global scope. They're different variables. So they're the same name, but they're different types. Now, in Blitz, you can't do this. So it depends on your perspective whether it's an issue or a good thing. I mean, I tend to think BASIC probably should be multi-instance, but I definitely get on board where it shouldn't be. But for us translating from Blitz, that means we've got to make sure that I have something that runs through the code, picks up when a variable is first used, and then we'll carry that type with it all the way through. So if it saw this in the future, it would have to output code like that to make it work appropriately in PlayBASIC. So that's going to be something I'm going to have to actually do. The same goes for things like, you know, functions and all that kind of stuff. So if you have a function name, you know, stuff or whatever, end function, we're going to have to run through and find these names. The declarations of functions are up front, pick out what the input parameters are, try and determine the return parameters from it as well, try and remap these return statements if there are any return statements, you know, result equals A times B or something. So we will have to do some pre-processing of the actual code. We'll run through and we'll pick up the function names first, we'll pick up the type names first, run back through, try and do a gleam of what the function names are to understand the parameters, because we need types first, and then we're going to do what parameters are what. And then we can glean what's left over is what probably dimension statements, and then we'll just run through and go, okay, what's left over are going to be variables. And that's how we're going to track what they are through each scope. I don't want to build a compiler that does this. You know, I want to just use some basic logic, have it run through, try and apply the rules as I understand them, and that's going to be a problem too. I don't really understand Blitz that well. So we can pick up most of the conversion rules, get something that, you know, is it close to running, but may not run straight out of the box. So it's more of a helper than it is a one-stop conversion shop. That's the goal right now. Because really for the code I want to convert myself, which is the XLNT GUI and some other things as well, I'm pretty much sure that I'll need to do a lot of secondary modifications to those to make them slot better into how PB likes to work, or how I like to work myself. But anyway, so that's something we've got to be cautious of, you know. So we've got to make sure our functions are appropriately remapped, our variables are appropriately hashed, or, you know, so if something was a float, for example, in Blitz, if you went, you know, b equals whatever, you know, and then you can happily use, you know, result equals b times this. And to a user of many basics, not just PlayBASIC, that looks like an invalid expression, because you've got this b variable here, integer b times 100, so you should get a result of 0, which is what you would get in PlayBASIC. Of course, we can't run that. It's got some Blitz style syntax in it, so we'll just pull that there, run it across, as you can see. So we would need our translator to pick up this B usage the first time, and then when it's output, apply this, and we get a whole different kettle of fish. So that's the kind of thing that I think is important that it does. Remapping the way the type backslash stuff as well. The nesting of types is not going to work that well. You have to sort of emulate that, like make little functions that do these behaviors. The more I sort of think about it, I'm sure we'll come up with some solution that's a bit of a hodgepodge, but we'll get the job done. To do a great job of this, you'd have to write a full-blown Blitz compiler. And what I mean by that is you would literally import the Blitz code the same way as what the actual compiler would do this, lex it all down, resolve the expressions, and everything is type aware all the way through. So you use the same rules, same logic that they're using, that BlitzBASIC is using to do those conversions up front, and then you can output the appropriate version of that same logic for PlayBASIC. So you actually mangle the code and end up with different code altogether, but you would get something that is much closer to running out of the box. But it's a big annoying task, and I can't be bothered. So if you want to tackle that problem, be my guest. Go and do it. Anyway, head back to the code. So at the moment, we've just got these translation calls. We're just doing some merge of keywords, which handles that makes the end if stuff, the end those things become those. We've got a very simple support for doing end while and constant, those kind of things. a bit of logic through there to do these other traps. And that's the whole conversion. So clearly it will become more evolved than this, but not much, I wouldn't have thought, you know. This is how the code is rebuilt back into a string form. We just get the first token and we just run through it. Grab this token, grab the text, add the links, etc. Move through. The actual end of line token doesn't have any code attached to it. I just noticed that before. It should just have the end of line characters, which would make this null and void. It would be not even necessary. I mean, speed wise, it's perfectly fine. You know, 250 milliseconds to load it, lex it, run through it 3 times, and then dump it out as text to the console. So it's not too bad. I'm not saying it will always be that quick, but we've got other passes there we need to track, like these variables, these type variables here, and then the backslash stuff there. If we could get that done for you and track the variable types and track the array types, etc., and remap those things for you, that would go a massive way to getting code to work at. You know, it would be a huge help for anyone who wants to port some old Blitz code, or if you find Blitz code out there, you want to try and make that run. Probably asking for trouble, aren't we? Crazy. Anyway, I'll leave that there. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye.